Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to Self-Worth Saturday. It has been a hot minute since we've had one of these and I feel like I'm a little out of practice, but we're just gonna launch right in just a second to this week's topic. But before we do, quick little rundown if you are new to Self-Worth Saturday. This is a video series where I like to bring up a topic related to self-worth. This is usually a topic that's been voted on by you guys, people who are either in the Supportive Tarot Facebook group or here on the channel voting on my community tab, and talk about the topic. I like to give you guys some action steps and some advice based on my own personal experience with the path to self-worth. And I like to throw out some journal prompts or meditation prompts if you're not the journaling sort, and a weekly challenge. Usually this video premieres on YouTube, which means that when it first goes on, it'll almost look like a live stream, except for the video is pre-recorded and there's a live chat that accompanies it so we can have a little chit chat while the video plays for the first time. So if you're new here and you see a chat box, that is what's going on. I'm not actually typing and filming at the same time, although that'd be kind of cool. And I do type fast, so possible, but no. So this week we're going to be talking about how it feels when we're beating ourselves up over goals and aspirations that we haven't met, essentially coping with failure to a certain degree. But before we get into that, I want to quickly revisit our last topic. So last time we talked about sitting with discomfort, and the challenge was just to try to pay attention to those moments when discomfort arises and give ourselves the space and the time to really sit in those moments without feeling like we need to make it go away or avoid it entirely or distract ourselves, but rather to just be in that moment, let the moment have some space, and just see what happened. So I had a bunch of opportunities to practice this over the last few weeks, and what I found was when I was faced with these moments of discomfort and I was mindfully and actively practicing this idea of giving that discomfort space, I found that a lot of situations that might have otherwise turned into like an argument or tension sort of dissipated and it didn't sustain itself. And that's been my experience over the years with sitting with discomfort in general. But I'm really curious to hear how you guys did. So if you are watching this video, feel free to leave a comment down below with your experience in sitting with discomfort or share it in the chat. And if this is way too public of a space to talk about it, totally get it. You can talk about it in the Facebook group. You can journal about it on your own, but definitely take some time to reflect if you did tackle this challenge on what that experience was like for you. This week, talking about, and I think that, let me see how it was actually worded. Yes, releasing guilt or shame over goals not met. So this particular topic hits home pretty deeply because over the years I've had a tendency to really beat myself up when I don't follow through, when something that I envision doesn't come to pass. I can actually be a pretty goal-oriented person. And so sometimes I get over fixated on that end result, and if I don't get quite there, everything else starts to feel meaningless, and I can end up making myself feel worse no matter what I manage to accomplish at all. And this, I think, is a relatable experience for a lot of us because for many of us, we hold ourselves to the highest standard, and it can be really easy to fall into the trap of perfectionism or of feeling like it doesn't matter unless we meet a particular goal. There's a couple quotes I wanted to share with you that I think really set the tone for this discussion. Ellen DeGeneres said, "When you take risks, you learn that there will be times when you succeed and there will be times when you fail, and both are equally important." Winston Churchill said, "Success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm." Anytime we don't meet a goal or we fulfill a dream, we feel as though we've failed. And I think that the associated emotions with that, often being guilt and shame, are really, really present, particularly when those goals or dreams affect other people, not just us. I don't know about you, but when I'm the only one impacted by not meeting a goal, it's a little bit easier than if I feel like other people are counting on me or watching the process and I feel like I've somehow let other people down. I feel like sometimes, at least for me, this comes up when it's something I want to do and then something shifts and I don't end up doing it, and then I'm almost embarrassed that I ever talked about it in the first place. Sometimes I just feel ashamed of myself because I feel like I'm capable of more, and when I don't accomplish what I want to accomplish, everything starts to feel meaningless. And this may sound repetitive because for me, it's complex, but it's also really, really simple. You set a goal, you decide to do something, something happens, it falls through, or you don't follow through yourself, or it doesn't come to fruition, or perhaps the goal is dependent on other people, or like a good example might be wealth. Wealth is a really obvious over-the-top example. You set a goal to make a certain amount of money, and there's a lot of that you can control with your actions, the amount of work that you put into a project or to an endeavor or a business. But at the end of the day, it's still up to other people to buy what you're selling, or give you that promotion, or hire you, or whatever it might be. So sometimes the goals that we set for ourselves, they're not necessarily things we have 100% full control over. And I think that's an important factor to recognize, because sometimes I feel like we treat ourselves as if we should have control over everything. And that's one of the traps of perfectionism. I think that what we're really talking about here, when we're talking about guilt and shame when we don't meet our goals, is kind of like talking about self-torture. We're basically beating ourselves up. And if we learned anything from our discussion on dealing with our inner critic, which I will link up in the cards, then we know that we should not be letting this inner voice have the driver's seat to do most of the talking. We should be balancing that out with what we know is true. I think that what it really boils down to is that we're usually voluntarily deciding to try something or do something, and therefore anything less than a good experience or a successful experience feels like a waste of time. I think one of the reasons that we feel bad when we miss the mark is that we set our mark a little too high. Sometimes what happens is we've set a goal that's not necessarily as attainable as maybe we thought it was, or maybe we just have a bad habit of setting unattainable goals. This is actually one of the ways we can self-sabotage, which I will also link our discussion to self-sabotage up in the cards. But when we set goals that are unattainable, either on purpose, well, subconsciously on purpose, or accidentally, it's unattainable, right? Sometimes we think something should happen faster than is realistic, or sometimes we think more of something should happen than is realistic. There's a difference between having a goal to make $5 more in a month and making $1,000 more in a month. And I think sometimes we can get a little lofty, and when we set that goal too high, again, either subconsciously on purpose or on accident, we're gonna be disappointed when it doesn't follow through or when it doesn't get to that mark. I think that part of what happens is that we're dealing with imposter syndrome, and we feel like we don't belong. So then we try to prove ourselves by hitting a goal or meeting a target, and then when or if we don't meet that target, now we suddenly feel like we have proof that we really are an imposter and we don't belong. This can happen in the professional environment, but it can also happen in the personal environment. It could be that your peers are good at a particular thing. Maybe it's music or drawing. And so we're like, oh, wow, I don't really fit in with these people because I can't draw and I don't sing. Then you might set a goal to get good at those things, and then when you don't, feel like this is proof that you don't belong. Sometimes it's because we're afraid to get closer to people, and then we place these barriers up that are like, okay, well, if we can't tick off box A, B, and C, then this isn't meant for us. And I think that that's where we get ourselves into trouble. It's a way that we block ourselves off from experience. This idea that we need to be good at everything we do is a kind of a fallacy that sets us up for disappointment in general. I think that sometimes what we're doing is just trying to prove our worth to ourselves. If you're struggling to feel worthy and valid, then you may be trying to prove your worth through actions and activities and accolades and credentials. I know that this was really an easy thing for me to slip into when I first started teaching yoga. It was like, okay, I'm gonna be a yoga teacher, but I'm gonna be like the best. Like, I'm going to take all of the courses, get all the certifications, and I did. It's not that I didn't accomplish those goals, but at the end of the day, if I don't feel like I belong and I don't feel worthy to teach, that's going to follow me no matter how many credentials I hang on my wall. And that was a lesson that I had to learn, and that was a process I had to move through, was recognizing that I needed to believe that I belonged there before I could really embody that space and stand in my power And no credentials change that. If what you're doing is struggling with your own worth, then no matter what you go after, no matter what goal you try to reach, anything less than perfection will feel like it's validating that lack of worth that you're experiencing. This is why so much of the work that we do kind of comes from the inside out. I think that sometimes we hang our worth on needing to have a particular type of lifestyle, that we haven't made it as an adult unless we own the house and have the car and have the husband or the wife or, you know, the picket fence and the dogs and all that kind of stuff. I think sometimes society tells us that we haven't made it as an adult or made it as somebody who is worthy unless we've ticked off some of those boxes. Sometimes this stuff is about body image, and sometimes it's about our status in society, and sometimes it's about what we do for a living. And rarely is it actually about what it's about, which is who we are. I'm drooling on myself because I'm getting that excited about this topic. That worked up. I'm gonna have a beverage. It's season time. It's like Thanksgiving in Canada weekend right now. So I am drinking sugar-free cranberry ginger ale, and it's delicious. Anyway, I went on a bit of a tangent there, but I think it's really worth being aware of where your goal-driven mindset is coming from, because there's a healthy way to set goals, and then there's sort of a self-sabotagey way to set goals. And I think it's important to know who you're setting the goal for. Are you setting it for you, or are you setting a goal because you think you should be? But we'll get there in a minute. Sometimes something's happening. Sometimes what's happening is that we are trying to attain a goal because we just want to. Maybe you've decided you want to learn how to play the guitar. That's fantastic. But sometimes we hold ourselves again to a standard of like, okay, well, I'm gonna learn to play guitar, and then I'm gonna join a band, and I'm gonna tour the world. And do you see where there's like some middle ground missing in this goal setting process? You might be setting the goal for yourself, but if you're not keeping your expectations grounded in what is real and attainable for you personally, then you're still setting yourself up for failure. So, okay, let's look at the fact that, let's look at sort of preventative. So if we want to prevent or avoid this feeling of, and really ultimately we're not going to be able to completely prevent it because life happens, but I want to start talking for a minute about how to set goals in a way that sets you up for not having that big crash if or when those goals aren't met. First things first, make sure you're setting the goal for the right reasons. So if you're trying to prove something to yourself or to someone else, you're setting yourself up for an unpleasant experience if things don't go perfectly. I think it's important to know the why of why you're setting a goal, why you're trying to do the thing. And if why you're trying to do the thing is about a feeling or an experience or learning, let it be about that. But if you're doing it just to tick off a box you think you're supposed to tick off in order to feel worthy or to prove your worth to somebody else, you might want to question the goal in the first place. The second thing is to practice baby steps to your baby steps. So I will link up in the cards our video on baby steps. But when it comes to setting goals, you want to ladder your goals. In other words, you want to set a tiny goal to the next goal, to the next goal, to the next goal. But let's work this problem in reverse. Let's say you want to make $500 more a month than you make now, and you have a small business. Then you need to break that goal down into digestible pieces and forget the $500 for a second. Start with something super, super attainable. I want to make $5 more a month. And then set the goal and then come up with some action steps you're going to take to meet that goal. Once you've started making $5 extra, then your next goal is to make $10 extra, and so forth and so on. It may seem silly to set really, really tiny goals, and maybe you're in a situation where because of the reason that you need to meet this goal in the first place, you're on a time limit, but it's still important for you to consider how you can bite off no more than you can comfortably chew. I hope that makes sense. But laddering goals, breaking it down into lots and lots of small steps. And I'll tell you that I've learned this as a teacher of whenever I teach anything, I find that people experience more success and are more likely to continue towards their goal if they can celebrate the little successes If they just feel like they're missing the mark, people will walk away from an experience or from an attempt to do or learn something new. But if it's like, hey, today the goal is to just not fall down when I'm on my yoga mat, then congratulations, you succeeded. And then you can start to like experience more and more of those tiny little successes, and those build your confidence to go for bigger and bigger goals. When we're talking about the why, it's important to remember that the why should be more important than the end result. Bringing it back down to something really, really mundane like money, if the goal is to make $500 more in a month, ask yourself why you need to make $500 more in a month. And maybe what it's about is you're looking to have some more wiggle room so that you can have a more comfortable lifestyle. If that's the case, focus on enjoying your lifestyle with that extra money as it comes in. Let yourself enjoy the process as you work towards your goal, because if you're not experiencing the reward of what it is you're working towards as you're working towards it, then really you're just practicing self-punishment and self-restriction until you hit a particular point. I hope that makes sense. It's kind of like, okay, if I want to learn guitar so that I can be in a band, and I'm so focused on being in a band that I'm not enjoying practicing the guitar, who am I helping? How am I getting rewarded for this experience? I want to be able to focus on enjoying playing guitar, because at the end of the day, the reason I want to go play in a band and tour the world is because I love music. So let myself love music as I'm learning. Does that hopefully come across the way that I want it to? The idea is to connect to your why and to stay connected to your why as you work towards a goal. Okay, I'm getting a little off track. Practice becoming attached to the practice or to the experience, not the outcome, which is a lot like what I just said, but I worded it differently. Stay in touch with your why and enjoy the process. If you can enjoy the process, then whether or not you hit that mark, you'll have still had a positive experience. Okay, so those are all sort of preventative things when it comes to actually goal setting, so that you can hopefully prevent the big crash if and when certain goals don't get met. But let's say it's too late. You've already not met the goal, you're already beating yourself up, you're already feeling like a failure, you feel embarrassed, you feel ashamed. Now what? So the thing about this is that we need to be able to break this down a little. So let's do this. When you have some time, write down a goal that you have messed up or missed, a goal that you haven't met that's got you a little bit embarrassed or beating yourself up. And then think about everything you did or write this down, think about or write it down, everything you did along the way towards that goal. The answer might be nothing, and I'll get to that in a second, but if you've taken a single step towards your goal, doesn't matter what that step is, think about what that was. An example might be, let's say your goal is to run a marathon, and for a few weeks you ran for 10 to 15 minutes a day, and you had intended to build up your distance and your endurance so that you could run for longer and longer and longer. But forget the end result for a second and what you were hoping to achieve, and instead think about what you did do and consider what and how what you did do was a benefit to you regardless of the outcome. So maybe you only ran for 10 to 15 minutes a day for a few weeks, but you probably improved your heart health. You probably learned a little bit about whether you do or don't like to run. Maybe at the end of this you decided, oh, running and me just don't get along. Or maybe at the end of this you realized you really like running, you just have no interest in running a marathon. Or maybe you just got bored. But regardless, what did you get out of the experience of running for 10 to 15 minutes a day for those few weeks? If you can recognize what the positives were regardless of the end result, you can reframe the discussion in your own mind or the internal conversation and bring yourself back to what was positive about the experience of trying. So maybe you didn't acknowledge a whole bunch of the mini goals that you met on the way to trying to reach the big goal because you didn't set mini goals. Let's say your goal was to make $500 more a month. Let's go back to that one. And let's say you only ever ended up increasing your bottom line by $25 a month. Well, did you ever celebrate the $5, $10, $20, and $25 that you added to your bottom line? Probably not. A lot of times what happens is that if we succeed, but we don't succeed enough, we beat ourselves up, which when you think about it is just mean. Really, we should take a moment and look at all the little successes we had. I'll tell you a story that happened to me. I decided to try stand-up paddleboard yoga. Now I was like, okay, I'm a yoga teacher. I've trained other teachers. I got this. I know how to do the yoga thing. Had no idea how to do the stand-up paddleboard thing. So that was interesting. And I knew it was a risk, but I wanted to do it just to do it. And my only goal was not to fall off the stand-up paddleboard. I didn't care if I did any yoga. I didn't care if I just laid on my board the whole time. My goal was not to fall in the water. And that night, I was the only one that fell in the water. So the thing was, what I realized is that my celebration after the fact was that I tried it. That despite my goal of not wanting to fall in, I still tried it. And there was a me not that long ago that would have never in a million years even tried it because my fear of failing at it would have overcome my desire to try something new. And I think it's important to look back at your experiences, even if your experience was just an attempt at something, and to think of how you can celebrate what you did do regardless of the outcome. Finally, do something to acknowledge or celebrate what you've accomplished. Probably if this subject resonates with you, there's at least one big goal you feel like you made for yourself that you never succeeded at. But what can you find from that experience to celebrate about you? What can you do to congratulate yourself for what you did accomplish or where you did get to on the way to a particular goal? Okay, so let's say you didn't even take the very first step. You set a goal for yourself and you just blew it off entirely, or you avoided it entirely, or you just failed utterly. Not one single bit of progress was made. Because I know there are some of you watching this video that are like, yeah, but what if you did nothing? What about that? So, another writing exercise or a thinking exercise. Think about your goal that you didn't do anything towards. And think about why that goal matters or mattered to you. If during this process of thinking about this, you realize that it doesn't matter to you, then great. You've just unraveled the problem. You set a goal about something that you didn't ultimately care that much about. Maybe somebody else told you you should have this goal. Maybe it was a peer thing where you were trying to do what other people were doing or set a goal similar to your friends or your family. Maybe it turned out to be something that just wasn't for you. But maybe you realized that it did matter to you. And so if it was something that mattered to you and you didn't even get started, then you need to take some time to sort of uncover and explore why you didn't even take the first step. Chances are there's something you're afraid of. And if you can peel the layers back and figure out what it is you're afraid of, you might find that you figure out a path through to maybe take a few little baby steps in the direction of that goal. And finally, remember that whether you decide ultimately that this goal that you set that you never did anything for was for you or wasn't for you, regardless, you can still celebrate the information that you learned about yourself through the process. Sometimes we set a goal and we realize, well, no, that wasn't for me. What was I thinking? That's information. Congratulations, you did an awesome. You figured out something new about yourself. Or maybe you set a goal and you thought it was something that was aligned with what you wanted and you got a little teeny ways in and you're like, this is not for me. Also, congratulations, you've learned more information about yourself. I feel like there's very few things that you could try that don't result in some growth or opportunity for you to get to know yourself a little better. And if nothing else, that is a takeaway from almost any attempt at anything you ever make. So, let me hit you with a few journal prompts and then we're going to do our oracle card reading and I'll hit you with our weekly challenge. Journal prompts. Now, journal prompts can also be things that you meditate on. Here you go. Journal prompt number 1. Write about a goal you had that you failed at reaching and why you initially set that goal for yourself. 2. Explore what you did or tried along the way to trying to meet that target and write about how doing or trying those things may have benefited you regardless of the goal not happening. And 3, write how your experience trying to reach that goal may have been different if the actual process of trying to reach it had been enjoyable or pleasurable to you. I mean, at the end of the day, if you like what you're doing, you're going to have a good experience regardless of whether you hit a particular target or mark at all. So that's my thoughts on that. I hope that this topic kind of hits some marks for some people. I'm going to pull us a card from the Angels and Ancestors Oracle by Kyle Gray. The artwork for this deck is by Lily Moses. I had been working with this deck all week and I adore it. It's actually really wonderful for this time of year, and I find the messages have been just really, really powerful. But I just want to pull us a card specifically about how we treat ourselves when it comes to setting goals for ourselves, how we can be kinder and more patient and more loving and compassionate when things don't go the way that we wish that they would. This weekly challenge is going to be, this week, see if you can pay attention to any goals you might currently be working towards, whether formal goals or sort of informal goals that are in the back of your head, and see if you can reframe the way that you are pursuing them so that the process is more pleasurable, so that you can enjoy the experience of working on them and can let go a little bit of your attachment to an outcome. Alrighty. Today's card is Fire Guardian. Ignite your passion. The Fire Guardian is a reminder to connect to your inner fire. If what you are working towards is not something you are genuinely excited about, or at least excited about trying, why are you doing it? Sometimes we pursue goals that aren't meant for us because we think we should be. You can see that I'm talking with my hands here. But I think the Fire Guardian reminds us that we should find that inner fire and connect to that when we're working towards any kind of goal. And if you're not feeling that fire, ask yourself why, and then ask yourself what you're getting out of the experience. Sometimes goals are almost necessary. They may be necessary for our health. They may be necessary for our financial or stability or well-being. But at the end of the day, how can you connect what you're working towards with your inner passion, that fire in the belly? See if you can connect with that, and your experience will be different. Most importantly, remember to ladder your goals with lots and lots of little baby steps. Celebrate every success along the way. And remember that even if you don't make the mark, you tried something, you did something new, and you likely learned something about yourself in the process. Thank you so much for joining me for this week's Self-Worth Saturday. Peggy and I will be on for a live chat after this video. There may be a little gap because at the time I'm filming this, I'm also preparing to take my dog to the vet in the morning, so things might be a little off schedule, but we will definitely be on for a live chat discussion about this topic. If you missed the live, don't worry, you can come back and watch it later. They are always available up on my channel. Remember that you can always book a reading with me at supportivetarot.com. Peggy's Peggy bag sale over at Sparks Creations on Etsy is ongoing. I think that's it for business. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to say to yourself as often as possible, I am worthy and I am unafraid. I'll see you all later. Bye.